Hi. On Constitution UK, we rely on our facilitators, people who keep the debate on the move. And we've got two of them in the studio today, Imogen Galilee and Harry Blain. Harry, why do you think this project is so important?
Well, to be honest, I actually was grew up in Australia, where the Constitution is sort of something that no one really talks about, seen as pretty boring, and is not really the subject of much debate. But I spent a great deal of the summer in Scotland, actually, and I was talking to a lot of people up there.
What, fighting for some side of the referendum?
Yes.
Which side, can we know?
Separatism.
Voting yes.
Voting yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Although I wasn't able to vote myself.
All right. This is just a little sort of side item. Go on.
Yeah, but I think the message that came across there was that the Constitution really matters. You need to ask the kind of more fundamental questions about how power is distributed. And since moving down to London, I think a big question for me has been, how can we broaden this debate? So I think that the project we've got here is really good for doing that. You know, going beyond the sort of parliamentary committees and advisory boards and all of that, and really trying to open it up to the general public. I hope we can kind of spread the discussion much more broadly.
So the more people involved from your point of view, the more important
it
it
is.
is.
Definitely. Particularly people outside of the sort of elite circles that usually tend to dominate these sort of debates, definitely.
Yeah. What about you, Imogen? Is that what drew you into it?
Well, I mean, I suppose a similar thing. I think it's intrinsically important to know how power is distributed. I think one of the interesting things about this was seeing what people thought about it, because most of the time the way that we hear about the opinions that we hear about how power is distributed are through the media and politicians and things like that, and we don't often hear about just from first principles, instinctive, how do we feel about how power should be distributed in the country, and I think that's probably what the project is important for.
You mean getting to people who are outside, well, what I think you call the elites, is that it?
Yeah, asking people if they were to look at this from a perspective where they're not being constrained by interests of party, which a lot of people are in the media, how would they ideally, starting from scratch, design the country? And I think that's the most interesting question really about this.
Now, some of the people who look at this, the elite, I'm a member of this professorial elite. Some of these people say, look, you know, it's totally random who these people are who show up. What possible claim do this scattering of hundreds, even if you get hundreds, thousands, even if you get thousands of people have to have any kind of credible sort of say in the drafting of a constitution? Is there a little bit to that, or?
Yeah, there is a little bit to that.
Don't agree too much, Imogen.
I'm not going to agree too much.
What are the answers to that?
Well, I think the answer to that is just achieving that kind of critical mass that hopefully the project's moving towards, getting more and more people in there, and therefore making the results more and more meaningful.
Right. So trying to create a crowd. Harry, when you're addressed in the pub about this, what's your answer to my point about sort of elites leading selected people?
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think there's that much to that argument. I think that's actually central to the problem that we've been facing in Britain, which is that people feel like they're being governed by a so-called expert class, and time again this expert class seems to have failed them. And again, drawing back to my experience in Scotland, I think what people were sort of universally rejecting across the board was this idea that because people have a certain educational background or they're affiliated with a certain party, that they have the right to speak on these issues of critical national importance. So I think it's important to basically reject that argument outright. While it's good to have contributions from people with particular areas of expertise, I mean, this is about designing a constitution, about designing a country in the interests of the people that live there, not in the interests of the governing classes who have, you know, I think quite repeatedly failed their constituents.
Right, so you've got a strong view on this. You're not really a facilitator. You sound as though you're highly, if I may say so, opinionated.
Absolutely.
And you're pretty comfortable with that. So are you?
I'm 100% comfortable.
You're
with that.
leading your flock, or you're kind of giving them opportunities to speak?
I try to be a provocateur when I can, but it's definitely about trying to sort of open up the debate as wide as possible. But I don't pretend that I am sort of value neutral or anything like that.
Imogen, are you kind of contrasting this? Are you a kind of neutral facilitator?
No, well, it's very difficult to be. I try to be, but I think that there's a blurred line between arguing with someone on simply disagreeing with them and saying you're wrong about something. I think that was particularly evident in the debates on the EU and the ECHR. There's a lot of confusion, I think, even amongst people who are contributing, and it's one of the main problems I think that I found with what the EU is, what the ECHR is, how are they different. And on one level, you just need to understand what that difference is to be able to have an informed opinion on that. But whenever I try to, in my view, correct someone, there's also the risk that what I'm saying is actually, you're just wrong, and there's nothing to your argument at all.
But there's a difference, isn't there, between getting the facts wrong and saying that I think, for example, that Britain in Australia as it is should be A, B and C. It's completely wrong. And having an opinion. An informed opinion is never wrong in our system, isn't it? People can say what they want as long as there are not factual errors.
But there's a lot of misinformation out there produced by the elites themselves in their own interests. And in order for people to understand or to be able to articulate in a way that we can listen to, in a way that we can empathize with, which I think we should be doing, we have to guide them in a way that they know the implications of their own argument, and I think that's the difficulty.
You don't want to guide them towards the implications of their own argument. You want to guide them towards following your argument.
No, that's not true. But what I want to do is, I mean, in terms of the contributions I try and make, I want people to ask questions that they wouldn't normally ask. I think that's kind of what it's all about. And I think that that's the whole point of this project, which is that we want to be asking questions that normally we wouldn't. So, for example, when we come to something like the section on rights and duties or something like that, we talk about people posting ideas of the right for education to be free for everyone, right? So this is something that
is that one of the big trends in your area?
It's a popular one, isn't it? In the rights and duties section. And I think that's one where it's quite important to be talking about that, because it kind of goes beyond saying, oh, well, how do we afford this in a particular way? How are you going to pay for this in your particular budget plan? And it's just going to say, what are the basic principles that we're going to use to govern the country? And I don't think you need to have a PhD, a master's degree, or an undergraduate degree to understand and grasp some of the basics of that argument.
Yeah, I see what you mean. What's been the big ones in your area, Imogen? What's come up more often in what you're managing?
The most popular idea we have is access to the legal system, legal aid or something like that. But apart from that, I mean, we've got loads. I think we've got over 60 ideas now, 63 ideas. And they're about all kinds of things. So we've got just sort of, I don't know, all kinds of stuff. I mean,
anything come up from your thing that's
I think we have
recurrent?
We have fewer ideas. We have about, at the moment, I think we're on about 34, 35. But we've got a lot of comments, and we've got quite a large number of participants now. I think we're heading towards 100.
In your little bit of the operation, in your
this is in the devolution area, specifically. And I think there have been some specific ideas that have definitely gained some traction. I mean, one in particular was the idea of moving Parliament north, which is quite interesting, as a way of trying to sort of, at least symbolically, re-centre power.
Well, like Stoke-on-Trent or something.
Well, I think York was one of the suggestions, but that seemed to get quite a bit of support. Initially, regional assemblies were very popular as well, but this is quite a big bone of contention, because the people promoting regional assemblies are often coming into conflict with those who are promoting an English Parliament, which is another one of the very contentious ideas.
Like the Republican thing, it's a hot button with a lot of people, is it?
Well, yeah, but it's very divisive. I think there are a lot of people who are saying we need an English Parliament, and then there are others who are saying, well, what's an English Parliament really going to do? Are you just kind of suggesting this to avoid the question of regional inequalities within England, within Britain?
Because what's interesting, if you're at a public meeting and it's being chaired, the guy who's a serial provider of information will be controlled, because you have occasions when you can grab the floor, but you can't do it all the time. Do we have a mechanism in this thing for stopping people from, as it were, being the equivalent of the barracker in the town hall meeting?
Well, we don't really. I mean, I've messaged one person and told them to take a step back very politely.
And did it work? Did they take
it worked. But I mean, by that point, they'd already posted a lot, and I mean, it's difficult, because once you post an idea, all the discussion which comes from that is framed by your original proposal. So if you have done it in your own view, people might sort of agree with the general principle of what you're doing and then vote it up, even if some particular detail might be a little bit out of left field, which is certainly the case for
he or she who sets the terms of the debate invariably wins, whatever the result seems to be. Anything surprised you about it, Harry?
Well, I don't know if I should have been surprised by this, but in my area in particular, devolution, it seemed that across the board, despite a range of disagreements among people, there does seem to be a sort of general dissatisfaction with the status quo. Yeah. Almost across the board, there are very few people who are saying, what's wrong with this current setup? Let's keep it how it is. If it's not broke, don't fix it. There's almost no support for ideas like this. So virtually everybody is saying, albeit with different formulas and proposals, that we do actually need to change things pretty fundamentally.
Yeah. You thought there'd be a bit more of a push for the status quo.
I thought there would be, yeah. I thought there would be. I thought there would be more people, sort of saying, let's take a step back. What were those crazy Scots up to and all of that sort of thing. But most people are saying, virtually the opposite, which is somewhat surprising. And I'm personally quite pleased with that because I think that's the whole point of the forum. Yeah. And I think also on that point before about trying to kind of moderate the extent to which one person can take over the debate. Yeah, I think that's one of our most important jobs as facilitators. I think the best way to do it is to try to pick up on threads, particular sets of comments, and pick out people who haven't actually posted particular ideas, but maybe have a good comment and say, well, why don't you bring that up as one of the key
and
ideas?
Encourage people to report.
Yeah, so try and sort of spread it as widely as possible.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen in the end? We're going to have this big event. What then? Should we march on Parliament? Harry, you've got a bit of a direct action field here. Should we march on Parliament? What's the next stage if we draft this constitution? Do we just leave it there?
Well, I think march on Parliament sort of idea might sound good, but I don't think that, at least in a lot of the ideas I've seen, that they're designed, nor will they be particularly popular with our elected representatives and our unelected representatives. So I think that actually, while putting it to the political parties and the political establishment is an important thing to do, if anything, just to sort of test their mettle, I think that it's actually important to sort of disseminate the Constitution as widely as possible throughout the media, throughout social media in particular. We've got a great opportunity to do this. We don't have to, these days, rely on newspapers or anything like that. We can really spread our ideas quite widely. So I think that's the most important thing, and to have as many people interested in it as possible.
So the fact of the Constitution draft is itself a success if you disseminate.
I think so, I think that the point of it is not to produce something that's palatable to those who are currently in power. I think the point is to produce something that will encourage more people to get involved and more people to become politicised.
I still hanker after maybe an MP winning. They have this ballot every year to see who can lead on what's called a private member's bill, putting our constitution in as a private member's bill and getting a debate there. Take your point, it's not for that particularly, but that's a possibility, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is kind of phase one. It's about just getting together as many ideas as possible, and it should be a bit messy. And then we sort of go through the next phases of refining the content and then bringing people along to actually contribute to the convention.
Harry, Imogen, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.